Good evening and welcome to the July 12th, 2023 meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We have 4 committee meetings this evening: the Fire Committee, the Finance Committee, the Police Committee, and the Building and Planning Committee. And we will start with the Fire Committee. I recognize its chair, Commissioner Bryn.
Thank you. Is a recommendation of approval to the board as a whole of memorandum of understanding for 5 of our 6 fire companies, and I'll address issues regarding the 6 fire company a little bit later. These agreements are the culmination of a considerable amount of work for a considerable amount of people, and as part of this strategic plan which each of the fire companies had adopted, as well as as well as the board. Before referencing any of the salient points of the memorandum of understanding, I want to note the significance of these agreements, which, in my view, really can't be overstated. Many members of our township are unaware that we have 6 separate fire companies, and the fire service is a conglomeration of those which recognize the independence of those fire companies, but get them to work in unison. There are career firefighters at each of the fire companies and volunteers, which are the backbone of the fire companies. There are over 200 volunteers in our fire service who we rely upon heavily in order to perform the service that our township gets on a daily basis. So what we have before us are agreements which should have been in place long ago. And they do define the specific services which are to be rendered by each of the fire companies, that they are to adhere to professional standards such as the National Fire Protection Association codes, and that while the fire companies are independent and adhere to their own bylaws, they also recognize within these agreements that they report to the chief of our fire department, the Lower Merion Fire Board of Directors, and this board as well. Operationally, the fire companies are to maintain contact with our department chief. Administratively and financially, the fire companies are to work with the township so that the revenue that they're bringing in, the expenses that they have on an annual basis are reviewed and set forth in a timely fashion for when we as a board set our annual budget. This all is placed in the memorandum of understanding so that this will work with complete recognition by the fire companies as well as the township of everyone's responsibilities. Additionally, there is reference that is made as to the fire apparatus or the fire trucks, which we have our own fire apparatus policy, which is already in effect, but this also discusses the mechanism for dealing with those trucks, as well as the fire equipment, something other than trucks which is acquired, who owns it, what happens with that as well, and inventory reporting requirements that each of the fire companies have to have on a regular basis. The Memorandum of Understanding deals with training responsibilities, dispatch system, reporting requirements. All of these are also covered, and for the first time, this is all in print. Nobody will have any guesswork as to what the obligations and responsibilities are. So in seeking this committee's recommendation of approval for this to be submitted as a board of the whole, there's a desire to go ahead and identify all of the people who have been responsible for all of the work that has been necessary over the years to bring this forth, except 2 things come to mind is A, if I start to list them, I know I'll omit somebody and feel bad, and that secondly, it'll start to sound like one of those Academy Award, presentations, and the names go on, because we have all the fire chiefs, the president of the fire companies, who spend an exorbitant amount of time over years so that we could finally have this in place. But not just because he's only 2 seats away from me, do I feel necessary to acknowledge, in an arm's length of a punch, to acknowledge our township manager, as well as in the audience tonight, our chief fire officer, James, excuse me, Jimmy McCoy. And also I want to recognize Brad Remick, who is the chair of the Lower Merion Fire Department Board of Directors. So with that, I don't know, Manager McNeely, if there are any supplements you wish to add about the contract or the memorandum of understanding, and then we can allow people to ask questions.
I think Commissioner Bernheim has been working on this for just as many years as I have and has gone through the entire process. So he's described it very well. I think one of the most important points this MOU establishes is a very clear chain of command. That's something that's been lacking in our fire service in any kind of written described manner, and this accomplishes that, which is a very important accomplishment in this MOU. Other than that, you've covered it well.
All right, so with that, I'll first turn to the board. If the board has any questions that they wish to raise. All right, and I see that the chief of our department is here. Chief McCoy, is there anything you would like to add to this, give you that opportunity? Okay, so with that, then I will formally make the motion that we go ahead and recommend to the Board of Commissioners to approve the memorandum of understanding with the following 5 fire companies whose Board of Directors have approved and executed the document. That would be Belmont Hills, Gladwyne, Merion Fire Company, Penwyn, and Union Fire Association. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner McComb. Any other questions or comments? And by raise of hands, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, it carries unanimously. However, one other item, if I may, President Sinai. I noted that there are 5 of the 6 fire companies that have signed this. The 6th is Bryn Mawr, and that has not yet occurred. Note the word yet. I have 110% confidence that it will occur. And Bryn Mawr, its representatives, were very actively involved in the years, literally years of work to come to this memorandum of understanding. And before each of the fire companies signed on to this, there even was a special meeting in which one of their administrative officers attended, and we thought that we had everything worked out. Bryn Mawr came back to us and had a question regarding some of the indemnity language, which is the agreement. Manager McNeely was very quick to respond. They thought that there may be a misunderstanding about what this language is, actually benefits the fire companies. And then a follow-up email was sent that their attorney still had a question. I volunteered to have the attorney please call me, be glad to get it rectified, whatever that question may be. That was supposed to happen. It has not yet. Again, I am sure that it will very shortly, and I have no doubt that we'll be able to clarify whatever issues they have. As set forth in the strategic plan and as part of these agreements, this really is a requirement which always should have existed before there's any funding to any individual fire company. So recognizing that we are slowly coming into that budget season, we need to get this done. I am sure that Bryn Mawr will recognize that it needs to get this done for future funding purposes, as well as the administrative and operational aspects of this. So I look forward to hearing from them. We'll reach out, and if things go the way I would like, we'd be doing this before our summer break. So thank you very much, President Simon.
And thank you very much, Commissioner Bernheim. So I will add in the in the list of people that Commissioner Bernheim thanked, he left out one very important one, which is Commissioner Bernheim. I think it's been pretty much his mission for an awful lot of years to not just get this over the finish line, but like actually create it and lead the initiative starting from ground, from the first step, to be able to do this. And I think it cannot be understated that in the range of things that this board can do, they're going to have a lasting impact on this township. This is one of the most significant. It is going to lead to a higher, better functioning, more successful fire system in this township. It's terrific, and I think on behalf of the board, we cannot thank you enough for your leadership on this matter. It's a delight that we were able to pass this today.
Thank you. It's a lot of other people, but they're not here, so thank you.
So with that, we have a, Commissioner Zoloff.
Thank you, President Sinai and Commissioner Bernheim. I simply want to underscore what Commissioner Bernheim said with regard to the Bryn Mawr Fire Company. Their failure at this point to sign is extremely disappointing, and I expect them to sign and join the other 5 fire companies who have worked hard to get on board with this MOU. And Commissioner Bernheim has expressed optimism they will do so, and I want to underscore that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zoloff. So with that, we're going to move to our next committee meeting, and that is the Finance Committee. As you could see, its usual chair, Commissioner Zoloff, is by Zoom tonight. So stepping in for him will be the Vice Chair, Commissioner Sean Whalen.
That is the award, to discuss the award of a contract for ADA curb cuts for the project for 2023. I will begin by making a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for ADA curb cuts, Project 2023, to the following bidder in accordance with bids received on Thursday, June 15th, 2023 at 11 a.m. Prevailing time, and the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer with the approval of the Directors of Building and Planning and Public Works and the CDBG engineer. And that's to go to LB Construction Enterprises, Inc. for a total bid amount of $99,900. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. And I would note quickly just that these funds are available through the Township's CDBG grant. And the budget for this project was actually $110,000, so the bid award would be just over $10,000, or just over 9% less than the actual budgeted amount. If we have any questions, Eric is here to answer them. Seeing none, did I miss anything?
Yeah, really common project, 10 bids, no bidder is known and has completed other sidewalk projects, under budget, approved, recommend, move forward.
I like it when they get as easy as this one. With that, I will ask, is there any public comment on this matter? Seeing none in the audience. Jody, is there anyone online?
No.
I don't see
There's
anyone.
actually nobody online right now.
In that case, seeing none, I will call this to a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Seeing none and no abstentions, that passes unanimously. And that concludes the Finance Committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Whalen. Our next committee is the Police Committee, and its chair is Commissioner McComb.
My best to keep it moving along. We have 2 items on the Police Committee agenda tonight. One having to do with a resolution regarding a hazard mitigation plan, and the other is a authorization to advertise an ordinance. I understand we're going to hear from Captain Pasternak for a presentation on both. So,
Sure.
floor is yours.
Everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
So this is pretty much a housekeeping issue. The county has updated their hazard mitigation plan. They do this approximately every 5 years. And as required by state law, the Township Board of Commissioners has to adopt it so that we would be eligible for funding and grant funding. So it's actually a 2022 hazard mitigation plan, but it's since been approved by the county and it's ready for our approval.
Okay. Any commissioner questions or comments? Jody, I assume anybody in the room with any questions?
Nobody's on this.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners adopting a resolution to formally adopt the 2022 Montgomery County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Do I have a second? Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. I'll call the vote. All in favor, please raise their hand, signifying aye. Any opposed? No abstentions? Madam Secretary, that passed unanimously. And then Captain Pasternak, we have another item having to do with right turn only restriction on South Roberts Road. If you could tell us just a little bit about that.
Sure. Lori, do we have that diagram? Is that? Thank you. So for several years, there were complaints about traffic and crashes along the entire county line corridor in the Bryn Mawr, Rosemont area. Traffic safety worked with Public Works and the township engineer, and actually got PennDOT to look at this entire corridor and to do a safety study themselves. PennDOT did make several recommendations, came to several conclusions, and they implemented several changes down there. One of which is this intersection here, which requires people to turn right on both sides, both on the Radnor Township side and on our side. A person cannot make a left and a person cannot go straight through. A traffic light has been added down at Montrose, and that's where they would prefer that the turns be made. They put in an island and they put in signage, and just like any other restriction within the township, a stop sign or a traffic signal, it has to be adopted by the board and supported with local ordinance. So this would add this intersection to the schedule of the ordinance, which is mentioned here in the issue briefing, and the restriction would be for right turns only.
Very good. I don't have any questions. Do any of you have questions or comments for Captain Pasternak?
Commissioner, I'd just note that it was actually Lower Merion and Radnor Township that did the corridor study for the County Line Road corridor, and this rose to the top of this Montrose intersection that combined with this Roberts Road, no right turn or no left turns on Roberts Road, were sort of the #1 priority that came out of the corridor study.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it probably wouldn't make sense not if we didn't coordinate, because then you'd still have a dangerous situation. So it's a good job by all. So I'm going to put in the form of a motion that we consider for recommendation of the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Township Secretary to advertise notice of intent to adopt an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 145 thereof, entitled Vehicles and Traffic, Article 15, Schedules 145-106, Schedule 6, intersections restricted as to turns and through traffic, by establishing a right turn only restriction on South Roberts Road at County Line Road. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Gladwyne. I don't see any public comment. I assume there's nobody online?
No.
Still nobody online, so I'll call the vote. Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand, signifying aye. Any opposed? No abstentions. Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously. President Steiner, that concludes the business of the Police Committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner McComb. The next committees are Building and Planning Committee. I recognize its chair, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you, President Sinai. So we have 3 matters on the agenda tonight. The first is approval of a certificate of appropriateness. I will note that there are 2 on the agenda, but the first, 45 East Lancaster Avenue, has been tabled for tonight. So we have an application for 929 Merion Square Road. I'm going to make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a certificate of appropriateness for 929 Merion Square Road, Gladwyne Historic District 23-11, as recommended by the Historical Architecture Review Board at their meeting held on July 11, 2023. Is there a second? Thank you, Vice President Gladwyne. Usually we do this with more than one application. I'm going to say, are there any commissioners who would like to hear any discussion or any explanation of this? I see no one raising their hand, so I will ask if there's any public comment on this application. I see none, no one online, so we'll call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Thank you. Any opposed? I see no one opposed. Any abstentions? I see none, so that motion carries. The next item is approval of Historical Commission applications. This is on page 6 of the updated agenda. There are 3 items here. Would any commissioners like any of these considered separately? So I see no one doing.
I think the one on Fisher's Road.
Okay, the 323 Fishers Road we'll consider separately. There are others, the 10 Thomas Avenue and 330 Gypsy Lane. Are there any commissioners who would like to have those considered separately? I see no one raising their hand. So I'm going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following applications as recommended by the Historical Commission at the meeting held on June 26, 2023. 10 Thomas Avenue, Bryn Mawr, Class 2, 2023-R-14, to rebuild a side porch with a subcommittee to review final structural details, flashings, and edge metal for the roofing. And 330 Gypsy Lane, Winwood, Class 2, 2023-R-15, to replace a combination of original and previously replaced windows on all elevations, citing Secretary of the Interior Standard 9 with a subcommittee to review details. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner McComb. Any further commissioner questions, comments on either of these? I see no one. Is there any public comment on any of these, either of these? No one online, so we'll call the vote on those two. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Raise your hands. Seeing none. Any abstentions? Seeing none. The motion carries. Okay, the next we'll take 323 Fishers Road. I will put a motion on the table, and then I assume we should get some explanation from Mr. Pritchard. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the application as recommended by the Historical Commission at their meeting I held on June 26, 2023 for 323 Fishers Road, Bryn Mawr, Class 2, 2023-R-16, to alter window openings in a 2007 edition of the historic residence, citing Secretary of the Interior Standard 9, with the windows to be removed on the west elevation to be infilled with a recessed section to indicate the prior openings and a window on the west elevation to be realigned with a subcommittee to review these modifications, as well as details of the proposed new door. Is there a second? Thank you, Vice President Gabbard. Okay, so, Mr. Pritchard, could you provide us a concise summary of this application?
I will do my best, Commissioner Grimes. Thank you, and sorry I can't be there in person this evening. I'm not sure if someone can control the slides in the room, but I'd be happy to go through what we have for this application. Yeah, so this was a former outbuilding from a historic estate. It was converted at some point into a single-family residence. If we could go 2 slides down. Sorry, I don't have the control of the presentation here, but
Just be patient. There we go.
Okay, so back in 2007, the Historical Commission reviewed an addition, a fairly large addition to this residence, which was designed very much in keeping with the architecture of the existing building. And you can see it there on the left in this photo. The next slide shows some of the modifications that are proposed. Originally, this addition, like I say, was built and designed very much in keeping with the window fenestration and many of the other aspects of the historic building. What the current owners would like to do is something much more modern. They're enlarging window openings. They are putting in single panes of glass, and in some locations, they are also removing windows. It really has to do with the interior function. Now, on this particular elevation, they are removing windows on that foremost stuccoed facade. And this is where the Historical Commission wanted there to be some indication of where those windows had been. Instead of having a big blank facade, I think the next slide shows what they would like them to do there. So where the dotted red lines are, those areas would be inset slightly from the main surface, so that it was evidence of those windows having been there. So creates a little more articulation on that facade. This was a difficult application for the Historical Commission to consider, because while the alterations are very modern in design, they are very different from the architecture of the original building. It is a modification to the 2007 edition. It's essentially a 16-year-old section of the building. The changes don't really affect the primary facades or any area that's visible from a public road. Aside from the door that was mentioned in the motion, the door there would be reviewed by the subcommittee because it is on the primary front elevation that faces Fishers Road. So the commission wanted a little more information on that, but otherwise the application is very much outside of the public view. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there President Sinai has a question or comment?
Yes, just a comment for why I pulled this out, and mainly to highlight this to the board. So just to put in perspective, this is a Class 2 property. You know, even if I had a strong objection to this, there's not a whole lot this board can do other than slow it down. I just don't see much reason for that. Though you know, this concerns me, and it concerns me in the following way, not the way that the Historical Commission considered it. Just by way of background, I corresponded with Greg about this, and I also spoke with the chair of the Historical Commission, Christian Bush, to get more background on it. You know, it concerns me not in the way that the Historical Commission considered it. They looked at this, they said, well, it's a 2007 edition. You're making changes to a 2007 edition. It's out of the view of the public way anyway. The 2007 edition's not historic, and so ergo, like, we don't like the fact that there's no divided lights in the glass. It doesn't match the existing building, but it's not historic. It's not a historic edition. But if you rewound the clock to 2007, when this addition was approved in the first place, the addition was approved with the part of it being that the windows and the way that was designed was really consistent with the house. And I am alarmed by, and I'm sure it's not intentional, I'm sure it's just the passage of time leads to this, but I am alarmed by a situation where in addition to a historic resource gets approved, and the elements that made it get approved subsequently come before us to be removed 15 years later when the passage of time and people and there is an erosion of the fabric of when that happens. I just raise this so this board at least recognizes that I at least have concerns about this. Having said that, my concerns are not actionable because it's Class 2. It really cannot be seen for the public right of way. I'm going to let it go. But I do think it is in the class of things that we should be keeping our eye on is this kind of thing. So apologize for the rant, but I felt that morally I felt like I had to say that. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you for those comments, President Sinai. And let me just say, I agree with them, and by you saying them, I don't have to say them in a much less eloquent way than you just did. But the other comment I would just note, sort of for the record, is that I agree that the fact that you can't see these elements from the street is of some worth when we're evaluating it, but I'm not aware that the historical code has any distinction about historical elements that can't be seen from the street as opposed to those that can. So I'm not going to make an issue of it because it's not relevant for this conversation, since, as you said, it's a Class 2, but I just feel that that point should be made. So are there any other commissioners? Oh, there are two. Commissioner McComb, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I'm not sure it matters a whole lot, but the question sort of rises, why is the homeowner doing this? I mean, it was, I suppose there are maybe the original window, the original, when I say original from 2007, the windows failed, and maybe it's not dispositive as to the reason, but I think it would be helpful to know why, because it was done fairly recently. It kind of ties in with President Sinai's comments that we approved it and now it's being undone.
Greg, do you have any perspective on that?
Well, I don't know exactly, but my understanding is that the interior function or the new interior function is driving the reconfiguration of the exterior of the house.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, by the way, I assume that the applicant is not participating in the meeting, is that correct? Do you know, Jody? No, okay, that's fine, or isn't here. All right, Vice President Gavin.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I think President Sinai brings up a really important point, and the distinction between Class 1 and Class 2 resources. And I've harped on this multiple times as this board has said, well, we don't really like it, but it's a Class 2 resource, and the most we can do is delay it, so we'll let it go. It's happened with historic roofs, it's happened with windows, it's happened with doors, it's happened with siding, it's happened multiple times. And I just want to point out that, yes, our hands are tied with Class 2, but we're the ones tying our hands. We're a legislative body. I think we really need to look at our historic Class 2 resources. If we believe that they're not that important and we want to allow people to change the buildings, that's absolutely fine. But if we truly believe that Class 2 historic resources are part of the fabric of what makes Lower Merion special, then we really should give ourselves the opportunity to untie our hands and do something about projects we don't think are appropriate for our historic resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions, comments? Please.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Here to what Commissioner Gavin just said.
Okay.
Just full support.
Thank you, Commissioner Whalen. Anyone else? Seeing none, and I would just note that some other jurisdictions do not have distinctions between their historical properties. They're either historical or they're not. And the key elements and the key in those situations, I think, is what's a contributing part of the historical property and what isn't. So you're correct. That is possible, and possibly should be, not possibly, should probably be considered. So is there any public comment on this matter? Seeing none, and nobody on, oh, please, Ms. Seltzer.
Adrian Seltzer, Wynwood. I totally agree with President Sinai and Vice President Gavin on this. I think we do not value our historic properties in Lower Merion Township enough, and there should be more that we can do to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with public comment? Seeing none, I will call the,
Josh.
oh, I'm sorry. Who's raising their hand? Oh, Scott. Sorry, I just saw a big hand there.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Let me just say this about this property, which is in my ward. To me, the most important aspect of this is what's before us cannot be seen from the public way. I mean, I question why it's even on our agenda. The points made by President Sinai and Vice President Gavin are valid points, but it's a much bigger issue than this specific property. And so I think we should proceed to approve this. But the points about the value of a Class 2 is a separate point for another time.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zella. Oh, I did. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Okay, I will call the vote on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. And thank, 1, 2, 3, I'm sorry, rate keeper, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Any opposed? 1 opposed, 2 opposed, an abstention, and 1 abstention. So the motion carries. For those who oppose, can this go on the consent calendar? The answer, okay, thank you very much. So Jody, they're okay with consent. So the last item on the agenda is to consider for recommendation of the Board of Commissioners approval to receive the Ardmore Master Plan. So Jillian is coming up. Commissioners have certainly weighed in on the master plan before. And you're welcome to do so tonight if you'd like to do that. And having said that, Jillian, if you seem like you have something you'd like to, some comments you'd like to make, go ahead.
I just want to say that we're really excited to be here with the final document, and we have been appreciative of everybody's wonderful comments throughout this process. As you may know, we had a draft of the document prepared and viewable for the public in February. We have worked with the Planning Commission throughout March, and then brought the plan to the board for comment in April and May. And we are now here with the final product of all of those comments. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the final document.
Right, that's fine. And before we take commissioner questions or comments, let me just note, as you said, there's been an extensive process that has gone on for months, if not more than a year on this. And I would note that some of the written comments we've received commend our staff and those that we worked with on the hard work and all of the public outreach on this. So thank you, Jillian and the building and planning staff for your work on this. So, commissioner questions, comments on this? Yes, Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to, again, thank the staff and everybody who participated, residents, and it's a great, I think it's a great plan. I particularly appreciate the revisions that you recently sent, and just wanted to highlight, or ask you to highlight the zoning task force that you're recommending, because I'm not sure that everybody is familiar with what that's going to entail, who's going to be eligible to participate, what that's going to look like, and I think it'll make a lot of people more comfortable with the plan if they can hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so there is a recommendation within the plan that if the board desires to make changes to the zoning, that there would be a zoning task force convened to look at parcel by parcel conditions and make recommendations based on that, make zoning change recommendations based on that. And I think, I can provide a little bit more background, and that's, this was kind of an outgrowth of concern that there has not been enough time since recent developments under the previous zoning to really get an understanding of what the right zoning needs are in Ardmore.
Okay, thank you. Is that anything else? Okay. Any other commissioner questions, comments? Commissioner Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Jillian, and members of the staff, members of the community who were part of the Ardmore Master Plan. I just want to make a couple of brief comments about a couple of things that I want to make sure that we keep a focus on. Master Plan, I think, is an important piece to help our maintain and develop this Lancaster Avenue, Montgomery Avenue corridor for business, but also the balance to make sure that it is a smart growth for the community. And in that, while I appreciate the piece of making sure that we revisit parcels around zoning, I think we should equally revisit the conversation around how we look at the recruitment, retention, and support of businesses for Lancaster in relationship to making sure that they are businesses that are conducive for the community. One of the things that, and feedback I've gotten back in this community in the last week or so is that we want to make sure that when we look at the business piece that we don't turn into the next vape community. Because people are concerned about some of the businesses that have been popping up. In Ardmore alone, we have about 4 vape stores within several blocks. And so that will be important that our township is equally involved in that. The second one is around the traffic calming piece. I think it's going to be very important that we have a comprehensive understanding about how the impact of current development, slated development, and future development has an impact on our community. I just came back from, I know that there's been a lot of talk about this whole promotion around having us to have more public transportation. But I think we have to be realistic about where we are with transportation in our community. I came back from London last week, and I'm in London, you catch a train every 10 minutes. They have dozens of racks for bikes. They have trails for bikes. They have an institution around public transportation. And the reality of it is, while we want to move towards that, we have to be realistic that we are not in that position. And the reality is SEPTA is cutting back on both busing and trains. So as we look at that, we have to make sure that we are being respectful of the needs of the community and what the impact of traffic with business growth and potential development growth on that. And the last two that I want to just re-emphasize is around streetscaping and greening. I think that we should do all things possible to plant as many trees, support shade, have open space as possible. Of course, that's easy for me to say because I don't have any ideas of how we do it, but I just thought I wanted to throw that out there. And the last one, equally, I don't have the ideas for, in which everyone on this board, I can't emphasize, have talked about it for all my time on here and continue to support, and that is looking at the national phenomenon around affordable housing. We don't have the answers, but I do appreciate the fact that this board, the staff, has continually have conversations about this, and I look forward to those continued pieces. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. You want questions and comments right now, yes? Okay, great. One question is, there's lots of concerns about height expressed from previous drafts. In this current draft, is there any explicit call out of a height, say 6 stories?
So there is, one of the recommendations that came from this board as well as the Planning Commission is to include the economic analysis for looking at zoning requirements and amenities. So there is a mention of height in that specifically.
But the plan itself no longer says like this spot should be 6 stories. Am I right about that?
It does not.
Okay, great. Just wanted to sort of address that right off the bat. That's my only question, so I'll just jump into comments. I'm going to be yin and yang here with Commissioner Stevenson, who makes very excellent points that I agree with, but I want to be a bit of a cheerleader tonight. Right now there's a dirt pit in Suburban Square, and whenever I walk by that, I think about the great potential for what's coming. I'm really excited about the new services and amenities that are going to come from that development, and especially about the stormwater improvement that's going to happen in that area and the positive impact it's going to have on North Ardmore in specific. There's going to be a similar pit of potential happening over here on the other side of Ardmore with Piazza, and similarly we're going to get new services and amenities and some improvements for traffic flow and improvements for pedestrian access and safety. And I talk about those 2 giant developments in particular because those are going to really reframe what Ardmore is, along with this master plan, which was in the Ardmore master plan. Sorry, I'm going to ramble a bit because I threw my notes together as I walked in. The Ardmore master plan was an idea that someone brought up to me 4 years ago and probably was talked about way before that. And I see it as something that took the ideas we were talking about in the zoning code and some of the changes we were making in our commercial areas in the zoning code, and is now bringing them forward to what we currently think the future of Ardmore and the future of our township should be like. And again, I see great potential in what we're doing here. Specifically, how we don't need to rely on new development for improvement for our services and amenities. This plan shows us where we have opportunity for public and private partnership and for specific public investment in our township. There is a vocal minority that will always express concern about any change we attempt to make, but progress and improvement require change, right? If you don't change anything, you keep everything the same, it won't get worse, but it's not going to get better either, right? And so this plan is a culmination of a tremendous amount of work, and I think the output of it is equally tremendous. Thank you, Chris, Jillian, the whole team for this effort and for incorporating so much feedback from us and from the community. I know in previous meetings I've been very critical, and I think you've addressed a lot of what I was concerned about. I'm excited for the future of Ardmore. a future of inclusion with housing for many different income levels, with a variety of businesses. I don't think we're going to become the vape center of southeastern Pennsylvania. I think it's a future that's going to include new development. It's inevitable, but I'm excited about the positives that will come with that. Our plan is prioritizing pedestrian access and safety, as well as alternative modes of transportation. And it's a future that involves public investment in our greatest asset, our community. So the last point I will make is on the topic of public investment, I'm just thrilled that we're starting the Schaffel Plaza, because I couldn't give a speech about Ardmore Master Plan without talking about Schaffel Plaza. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Courtney. Any other commissioners? Seeing none. We do not have a motion on the table yet. Are there any commissioners who would like to make that motion? Commissioner Kramer, please.
Make a motion that we receive the Ardmore Master Plan.
Thank you. I will second that. We will now move to public comment. Is there any public comment on this matter?
Hello, Adrian Seltzer, Wynwood. I first want to give a shout out to Jillian and Chris and the whole building and planning department for all the work, all the input they got in here. And but I do have a couple comments. When I was here a couple weeks ago, the project that was happening in Ballackinwood, which ran out of time. I forget the exact wording of what happened, but I think you understand what I'm speaking about. And a lot of you wanted to vote to extend that. I want you to think carefully about doing that, because when you extend something that had expired, then you can't do number 2, because you won't be able to include those recommendations that you could now have the opportunity to do. Put those recommendations into a gathering space or a privately owned public space. So those are recommendations that can happen with new zoning. So it could also happen if zoning expires, and then you have that opportunity. So I don't want you to miss those opportunities. With the streetscapes, I'm sorry, Commissioner Courtney, I've been conducting my own unscientific study of Sheffley Plaza, and every time I go past there or go into that parking lot, it is virtually full. There's only 1 or 2 parking spaces. So just, sorry. But some of the greening that I think we can do, because Rittenhouse Place is so wide, we could expand the sidewalk areas to include a green space on either side, and that wouldn't do the funky turnaround thing that just seemed weird, at least to me. That's my opinion. And you could have greening on both sides of the street there, because you don't really need all that space. So that was just a suggestion to plant, and would also do some traffic calming, because the street's not as wide. And I want to thank you all for all your hard work, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
The affordable housing thing. I'm sorry. I knew there was something else I forgot. When a lot of times when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about a house that the township buys and revamps and sells. Well, that is financially not viable anymore, because the cheapest house you're going to get is like $500,000 in the area. So I don't think the township is buying a house for $500,000 to be able to sell for $300,000 after doing repairs. So I think you should really pay attention to occupancy rates in the apartment complexes that are in the township and work with landlords in those complexes that have the highest occupancy, vacancy rates, to rent those apartments out at below market value, so that we can have more people that work in the township live in the township. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with public comment on this matter? Okay, I see none. Is there anyone online? Okay, no one online. So we did receive 4 public comments in writing on this. The first from Charles Alt of Haverford, who wrote about the Ardmore master plan as it relates to parking spaces for new construction, flexibility for building heights, and connectivity for pedestrians and bicyclists. Judith Christie of Ardmore wrote about the master plan as it relates to retaining historical character. Marlene Klein of Ardmore wrote about the master plan as it relates to rezoning and development, traffic, pedestrian, and bicyclist safety, and impervious surface and stormwater. And Michael Pollack of Ardmore wrote about the master plan as it relates to height and density of development and pedestrian and traffic safety. For those commenters and anyone else who is here or watching, the commissioners have each been given the full comments that were submitted to us in writing, and they're also available from the township secretary for anyone else who wants to read them. So I'll close the public comment. Are there any final comments? President Sinai.
If I just may respond to public comment.
Okay.
I just wanted to respond to one of the points that Ms. Seltzer mentioned, and thank you for speaking, and that is for all the parking that's in Schaffel Plaza right now. And I think it's fair to say that one can both want to park where Schaffel Plaza is and also recognize that we need to have parking. And the answer to that is not leave Schaffel Plaza parking. The answer is make sure we provide parking elsewhere. Some of that will resume when the SEPTA lot comes back. But as part of my perspective, is as part of the Ardmore master plan, planning for parking and when people come to Ardmore, where they park when they go to walk around town, it becomes vitally important. In part because the traffic concerns and the traffic calming concerns that people have suggest that we don't want people hopscotching in cars all over Ardmore. And that's a planning exercise to make sure that they walk that instead of driving it. And part of it is just making sure that we have not only sufficient parking, but sufficient convenient parking, right, for all the businesses that we want to have in Ardmore. And so it makes it a harder exercise, a more challenging exercise to balance the park and parking, but we rise to challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bernheim.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's one of the comments that we received. There was a line in there that struck a chord, and I just feel compelled to make reference to it. Ms. Christie writes, having lived in the township for more than 50 years, I am convinced our officials no longer care what we residents think. And from time to time, Ms. Christie has actually come up with some other items which have been some good and salient points, but I just felt compelled to note that respectfully disagree. And I have no doubt that when many of my colleagues read this, they had the same internal reaction. Watching what goes on at these meetings is just a microcosm of the thought process that is what each of us go through before we get here to have public deliberation or voting on things. And I think it's self-evident the degree to which each of us pay close attention to, among other things, that what the residents say. May not agree with us all the time, but we pay attention of it, as evidenced by the fact that we read these, and that one last line in her email to us stood out. So while I may not move the needle for Ms. Christie right here and now, I hope for others that if they share the view that we do not care what they think, that they can at least take my word for it. That's not true. We really do. We may not agree all the time, but we really do care about what people think. So thank you for permitting me just to expound on that.
Thank you. Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. A brief response to public comment, particularly Ms. Seltzer's comment. I agree. I think, and I've said this before, I think the greening of Ardmore is of exceptional importance, and I think it will increase walkability, and to the questions about parking and so forth. The greening not only has to help guide pedestrian, towards parking, but it has to be careful not to obscure signage and wayfinding signs. So it really, I think at the end of the day, 10 years, 15 years from now, the success of this, a lot will depend on, do we have a canopy? Is it walkable? Is it green? Is it the type of place people enjoy being outside? Or like so many places in America, people jump in their car and drive someplace and jump out of their car, and they, never get out of the car to see where they're driving through. So, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McKeon?
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. There were a few public comments that we got about height, and I know height's been a big concern, and I appreciate the comments that Ray Courtney made and the response we got from Jillian about the height and what's in there. But even in this, the master plan memo document that we got from June 2023, it states, for example, developments consisting of 4 to 6 stories may be appropriate in many areas within the overlay. And I just feel like that number 6 won't go away. If you erase it and you make it a 5, it'll come back as a 6 later on. So I just wanted to point out that I think the will of an overwhelming number of members of the community is really try to get this and limit it to 5, because there has been so much development in Ardmore over the last 20 years or so. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Zelov, please.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes. 2 comments on the public comment. The housing rehab program works extremely well, and the home purchase program continues to work. In fact, we met earlier today with Lower Merion Affordable Housing, and I say we, that's the Affordable Housing Ad Hoc Committee. The 4 of us met with Lower Merion Affordable Housing, and they said the reason that they haven't recently identified homes for purchase, renovation, and resale was not at all about price, but it was about availability of contractors. And so the threshold price that was suggested is not accurate. There is housing in this township at lower prices, and and especially those that are owner occupied. Our CDBG funded renovation program works extremely well and does a lot to maintain the existing stock of affordable housing in Lower Merion. With regard to Mr. Alt's email comments, he made it, I thought his comment was right on target. I've said many times that the way to get affordable housing is to increase density. It's hard to get away from that equation, and he essentially says that. And so many want affordable housing, but many don't want density. It's hard to avoid the equation that in order to have affordable housing, you need density. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Other commissioners with comments? I see none. Okay. We will then call the vote on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and signify aye. Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none. Any abstentions? Seeing none. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. That concludes the business of the Building and Planning Committee.
And thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes. And I almost hate to say this because it might jinx us, but believe it or not, I think that concludes the business of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners for this evening. Have a good night, everyone. Yeah, I think you're right.